How do you determine if an overseas security mutual fund is a PFIC or not? By the end of today's show, we're going to give you 3 ways of identifying if a security or a mutual fund overseas is a PFIC or not, which is critical for you as a US tax resident with overseas assets in the US. But first, let's do a quick refresher of what is a PFIC and why should we be concerned about?
Yes. So a PFIC basically stands for Passive Foreign Investment Company, and the acronym is PFIC. The key word here is passive. So remember that a PFIC is a non-US corporation that meets either a 75% passive income test or a 50% passive asset test, which means it earns most of its income from passive sources like dividends, interests, and so on, or holds most of its assets that produce passive income. So the US tax laws created these PFIC rules to prevent US taxpayers from deferring taxes and put in place a very punitive tax law around these PFICs. So basically, that is what a PFIC is, Jane.
So let me just ask the question one more time. Okay, we know they're not illegal, right? They're okay to invest in, but why should people be concerned about investing in PFICs or not before we can talk about how you identify them? If somebody asks you that question, how would you answer it?
Yeah, of course, we have to talk about that because they are legal. You can definitely invest in them or hold on to them if you've already invested in them. That's not the issue. What the issue here is the punitive tax regime around the so-called PFICs. Now, let me explain it shortly. Where if you look at the growth in the mutual funds in the US, a growth in a mutual fund is taxed at favorable long-term capital gains rates, which are unrealized capital gains. But if these were foreign mutual funds, then the growth in these mutual funds do not get that favorability as far as taxes go. In fact, they are taxed at the highest ordinary income tax rates. So depending on how much you are holding and what the growth in these funds are, they could become quite a bit of a tax burden on a person holding these PFIC funds. And there are specific elections that could be made to mitigate this, what is called an excess distribution regime or a PFIC tax regime. You could also look at tax treaties between the country where your mutual fund is and the US, but you may or may not get a mitigation for taxes in this case, Jane. Now, really quickly, the tax part of this, holding your mutual funds, is reported on the IRS Form 8621. In fact, the IRS themselves say that it could take up to 25 hours to complete a Form 8621. So, if you are holding on to, let's say, let me give you some examples. Let's say foreign mutual funds fall into this category, definitely. And these would be foreign registered mutual funds and or foreign registered money market funds. Sometimes a foreign retirement account could also be considered a PFIC, and or life insurance policies in foreign countries that are invested in the market could also be categorized as PFICs. But of course, you would have to look at each one specially and determine whether they are a PFIC or not. So these are just some of the examples of PFICs that we know.
Right. And so let's talk about, because you've already talked about what's bad about them. If somebody comes to me and they give me a foreign statement and they say, hey, Jane, are these things PFICs or not? We've come up with 3 ways of identifying if something is a PFIC or not that you can actually do at home. And that's what we want to address. So this addresses mutual funds or securities, as we've said, which are registered overseas. And that's a key thing. They'll call them foreign domiciled securities. And there are 3 ways you can tell whether this thing is a PFIC or not. And I always recommend go down this path. reach out to your tax professional, your CPA, your EA, your cross-border professional, and ask them, are these things PFICs or not? Let's see what they tell you. Number 2, reach out to the foreign fund company overseas and directly ask them if these funds are PFIC exempt or not. What we've discovered is if they're PFICs, the foreign company is not going to be able to give you that assurance. So if they're not able to assure you that these things are PFIC exempt or not, assume they're PFICs, right? Number 3, look at your statements. Look at the ISIN, the ISIN number is an International Securities Identification Number, which is a number given to all international securities. It will uniquely identify it as a security. So you look at that, it's usually a 12-character alphanumeric code. If the first couple digits are not you, then you know this thing is a PFIC. Does that make sense, Manasa?
It does, although there may be other instances of where you might be holding a PFIC, which may not fall into this. So definitely what Jane said, the first thing you should do is check with your CPA or EA and get their input if that investment could be categorized as a PFIC. So yeah, Jane, I think we kind of covered the 3 things that we need to look at. Yes.
Sounds good. Then let's conclude it. This is a shorty.
Absolutely. So thanks for listening, folks. And if you like our content, please follow us on Spotify or on Apple, wherever you listen to our podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating, because if you rate and you subscribe and listen to us, our podcast will be pushed out to more listeners, and that will be great. And we hope you share our podcast with your friends and family. Thank you for listening. Bye.